My name is Cordelia Wainwright, and I'm 73 years old. I'm sitting in my kitchen on a Tuesday morning in October, holding a letter that arrived yesterday. A letter that has the power to unravel 47 years of carefully constructed silence. Before I tell you what's in this letter, before I reveal the secret that's been eating away at me for nearly half a century, let me ask you something. Have you ever made a choice that seemed right at the time, but haunted every single day thereafter? A choice so profound that it shaped not just your life, but the lives of everyone you loved? If you're nodding, if you're thinking about your own buried regrets, then please take a moment to subscribe and like this story. Because while you're doing that, I'm going to tell you about the lie I told in 1977, the man I loved and lost, and the truth that's finally found its way back to me, just when I thought it was far too late. The envelope sitting before me is cream-colored, expensive paper, the kind people don't use anymore. The return address is from a law firm in Charleston, South Carolina. Inside is a letter from someone named Thaddeus Merriweather. He was my first love. My only love, if I'm being honest with myself, in a way I haven't been for decades. And he's been looking for me. Let me take you back to 1975, to Asheville, North Carolina, where I was a completely different person. At 23 years old, I was Cordelia Hayes then, working as a secretary at a small insurance company, living in a boarding house run by a widow named Mrs. Pemberton, and spending my evenings writing poetry I never showed anyone. I wasn't beautiful in the conventional sense. I had what my mother called strong features, a prominent nose, heavy eyebrows, a sharp jawline. But I had something else. I had a hunger for life that couldn't be contained in the narrow confines of what was expected of young women in our small southern town. My parents had died in a car accident when I was 19, leaving me with a modest inheritance that would have been enough to go to college somewhere, maybe reinvent myself. But I was paralyzed by grief and fear, so I stayed where I was known, where I was safe, where I slowly withered like a plant kept away from sunlight. Then Thaddeus arrived. He came to Asheville to work at the new architectural firm that was revitalizing downtown. He was 31, already established in his career, with a reputation for designing buildings that somehow captured the spirit of a place rather than imposing upon it. But more than his talent, it was his presence that captivated me. Thaddeus had this way of listening to you, really listening, as if your words were the most important thing in the world. We met at the public library. I'd gone there on a Saturday afternoon, as I often did, to escape the claustrophobic atmosphere of the boarding house. I was reaching for a volume of Emily Dickinson's poems when another hand reached for the same buck. His hand. "I'm sorry," he said, pulling back. "You were here first." I turned to look at him and felt something shift inside my chest, like a door opening onto a room I didn't know existed. He had kind eyes, the color of aged whiskey, and silver was already threading through his dark hair at the temples. "We could share it," I heard myself say, surprising us both. And that's how it began. Over the next 6 months, Thaddeus and I developed what started as a friendship and bloomed into something I can only describe as a meeting of souls. We would meet at the library, at coffee shops, at parks where we'd walk for hours, talking about everything. Architecture and poetry, dreams and disappointments, the places we've been and the places we long to go. He told me about his marriage that had ended in heartbreak 3 years earlier. His wife, Eleanor, had died of leukemia at 29. He spoke of her with such tenderness that I found myself jealous of a ghost. But he also spoke of his loneliness, of how he'd thrown himself into his work to avoid feeling anything at all, and how meeting me had awakened something he thought had died with Eleanor. I told him things I'd never told another soul, about how I felt trapped in my life, about the poems I wrote in secret, about my fear that I would disappear without ever truly living. He listened to all of it, every word, and never once made me feel foolish or dramatic. "Cordelia," he said one evening as we sat by the French Broad River watching the sunset, "you have a gift for seeing beauty in ordinary things. Your words paint pictures. Why are you hiding?" Because I'm afraid, I admitted. Afraid that if I reach for more, I'll lose what little I have. He took my hand then, the first time we'd touched beyond accidental brushings of fingers. What if reaching for more is the only way to truly live? That night he kissed me, and I, who had only been kissed twice before in my life, both times by boys who had no idea what tenderness meant, discovered what it felt like to be cherished. Our relationship deepened through that spring and summer in 1976. We were careful, discreet, because Asheville was still a small town at heart, and people talked. But in private, we were building a world together. He showed me blueprints of buildings he dreamed of creating. I shared my poems, my real poems, not the safe ones, but the ones that bled truth onto the page. "Come with me to Charleston," he said one August evening. "I've been offered a position there, heading up a new firm. It's everything I've wanted professionally. But it only matters if you're with me. Marry me, Cordelia. Let's build a life together." I said yes without hesitation. For the first time since my parents died, I felt like I had a future worth imagining. But I should have known. Happiness like that doesn't come without a price. It was September 1976 when my sister appeared. I haven't mentioned Lenora yet because, until that moment, she barely existed in my life anymore. She was 8 years older than me, had married young, and moved to Richmond with her husband, a man named Gerald who worked in banking. Lenora and I had never been close. She was the dutiful daughter who did everything right, while I was the strange one who read too much and had impractical dreams. She arrived at my boarding house on a Tuesday evening, unannounced, her face pale and drawn. Mrs. Pemberton showed her to my room, and I knew immediately that something terrible had happened. "Lenora, what's wrong? Is it Gerald?" She closed the door behind her and stood there, clutching her handbag like a lifeline. "I need your help, Cordelia. I need it desperately, and I have no one else to turn to." My sister, who had always been so composed, so controlled, began to cry. Not delicate tears, but great, gasping sobs that shook her entire body. I guided her to the chair and knelt beside her. "Tell me," I said. "Whatever it is, tell me." And she did. Lenora's marriage was a sham. Gerald was cruel in ways that left no visible marks. He controlled every aspect of her life, her money, her friendships, where she could go and when. He'd been having affairs for years, flaunting them, using them to humiliate her. She'd endured it all because she had no means of supporting herself, no skills, no education beyond high school. Her parents, our parents, were gone. She had nowhere to turn. But that wasn't the worst of it. "I'm pregnant," she whispered, 4 months along, "and Gerald says if I don't get rid of it, he'll divorce me and make sure I end up with nothing. He'll tell everyone I was unfaithful, that the child isn't his. His family has lawyers, connections. They'll destroy me." "Is the baby his?" I asked. She nodded. "Yes, but he doesn't want children. He's never wanted them. He says a child would interfere with his lifestyle." I held my sister while she cried, and I felt rage building inside me. Rage at Gerald, at the unfairness of a world that gave men like him so much power. Rage at myself for being so absorbed in my own happiness that I hadn't seen my sister's suffering. "What do you need from me?" I asked. She pulled back, wiping her eyes. "I need you to take the baby. After it's born, I need you to raise it as your own." The room seemed to tilt. "Lenora, please," she gripped my hands. "I've thought about this constantly. You're young, you're unmarried, but you're responsible. If I go away for a few months, claim I'm taking care of a sick aunt, I can have the baby in secret. You can say you adopted a child from a private arrangement. People do it. It happens." "I'm engaged," I said quietly. "I'm moving to Charleston. I'm getting married." Her face crumpled. "Then take the baby with you. Tell your fiancé it's an orphaned cousin's child. Anything. But please, Cordelia, if I go back to Gerald with this baby, one of two things will happen. He'll force me to give it up, or he'll make both our lives a living hell. This child deserves better, deserves love. I should have said no. I should have helped her find another way, a divorce, a women's shelter, anything. But I was 24 years old, and my sister was begging me with desperation in her eyes, and I made a choice. "I'll do it," I said. "I'll take the baby." Telling Thaddeus was the hardest thing I'd ever done. We met at our usual spot by the river, and I could see the joy in his face. He'd finalized the Charleston position. He'd found us an apartment. He'd even started looking at houses where we might eventually settle. His enthusiasm made what I had to say even more painful. "There's something I need to tell you," I began, and I watched his smile fade as he registered my tone. I told him about Lenora's situation. I told him about the baby, and then I told him the lie that would change everything. "The baby is mine," I said. He stared at me, uncomprehending. "What?" "I had a relationship before we met. Brief, meaningless. I didn't know I was pregnant until recently. I'm so sorry, Thaddeus. I should have told you sooner." The words tasted like ash in my mouth, but I forced them out. It was the only way, I'd convinced myself. If I told him the baby was my sister's, he might want to help find another solution. He might insist we find a proper adoption agency. He was good like that, principled. But I'd promised Lenora secrecy. She was terrified Gerald would find out, that he'd use the information to destroy her completely. So I made the baby mine in Thaddeus's eyes. "You're pregnant," he repeated slowly, "with another man's child. I'm so sorry. I understand if you can't, if this changes everything." He stood up, walked a few steps away, his back to me. I watched his shoulders rise and fall as he breathed. When he turned back, his face was carefully composed, but I could see the hurt in his eyes, the confusion. "Did you love him?" he asked. "This other man?" "No," I said, which was at least truthful. It meant nothing. "But you didn't tell me." "I didn't know. And then, when I found out, I was terrified of losing you." He was silent for a long moment. Then, "I need time to think." "Of course," I whispered. He walked away, and I sat by the river and cried until I had no tears left. 3 days passed. 3 days of silence, of me lying awake at night in my boarding house room, wondering if I'd destroyed the best thing that ever happened to me. 3 days of my sister calling from Richmond, asking if everything was arranged, if I'd told my fiancé, if the plan was still in place. On the 4th day, Thaddeus came to see me. "I've been thinking," he said, standing in the boarding house parlor, looking older than I'd ever seen him look. "About you, about us, about this situation." I waited, barely breathing. "I love you, Cordelia. I love you enough to accept this child as ours. I love you enough to move forward together, to build a family, despite this complicated beginning." Relief flooded through me. "You mean—" "I mean I want to marry you still. We'll move to Charleston as planned. We'll raise this child together. It will be our child in every way that matters." I should have felt joy. Instead, I felt the weight of a lie settling onto my shoulders like a yoke I'd carry forever. But I told myself it was worth it. I was saving my sister. I was giving a child a good home. I was holding on to the man I loved. "There's one condition," Thaddeus continued, his voice careful. "We don't speak of this again. The past is the past. Once we marry, once this child is born, we move forward. No looking back, no dwelling on what came before. Can you do that?" "Yes," I said. "Yes, I can do that." We married in October 1976, a small ceremony with just a few friends. My sister didn't attend. She was away caring for an aunt, I told everyone. Thaddeus and I moved to Charleston, into a small but beautiful apartment he'd found in the historic district. In February 1977, my sister gave birth to a baby girl in a private facility in Tennessee. I was there, though Thaddeus thought I was visiting a sick friend. Lenora held her daughter for exactly 10 minutes before handing her to me. "What will you name her?" she asked, her face pale and exhausted. "Adelaide," I said, looking down at the tiny, perfect face. "Adelaide Merriweather." "Take care of her," Lenora whispered. "Give her everything I couldn't." And she never asked about her daughter again. I wish I could tell you that my lie didn't matter, that Thaddeus and I built a perfect life in Charleston despite the deception. But lies have weight, and they poison everything they touch, slowly, insidiously. Thaddeus loved Adelaide. He was a devoted father, patient and kind, teaching her about buildings and beauty, reading to her every night. But there was always a distance between us that hadn't been there before, a carefulness, as if we were both walking on eggshells. He never broke his word about not discussing the past, but I could see questions in his eyes sometimes when he looked at Adelaide, particularly as she grew older and developed characteristics that must have seemed foreign to him. She had Lenora's thick blonde hair, Gerald's sharp blue eyes. She had none of my features, none of what Thaddeus might have assumed came from her biological father. If he noticed, he never said anything. We had a good life by external measures. Thaddeus's firm thrived. Adelaide grew into a bright, artistic girl. We lived in a beautiful house in a good neighborhood. We attended church on Sundays, hosted dinner parties, took vacations to the mountains every summer. But the intimacy we'd shared before, that deep connection, slowly eroded. We became polite strangers sharing a life, bound together by a child and a secret I could never reveal. I wrote poems still, late at night when everyone was sleeping, but they were different now. They weren't about beauty and possibility. They were about guilt and loss, about the price of choices made in fear. Lenora called once a year, always on Adelaide's birthday, always when she knew Gerald would be at work. She never asked to see her daughter, never asked for details beyond, "Is she well? Is she happy?" I would say yes, and she would say good, and then we would talk about weather and recipes and anything that didn't matter. She stayed with Gerald for 23 more years, until he died of a heart attack in 1999. By then, she was a ghost of herself, and Adelaide was a grown woman of 22, graduating from college, falling in love with a young man named Robert, planning a wedding. At Adelaide's wedding, Thaddeus took my hand during the ceremony. It was the first time he'd voluntarily touched me with affection in years. "We did something right," he whispered. "Look at her. She's everything we could have hoped for." I squeezed his hand and said nothing because the lump in my throat wouldn't let words pass. 2 months after Adelaide's wedding, Thaddeus came home from work complaining of chest pain. I drove him to the hospital. They said it was stress, gave him medication, sent him home. That night, as we were getting ready for bed, he looked at me with an expression I couldn't read. "Cordelia," he said, "there's something I need to tell you." My heart seized. "What is it?" "I've known," he said simply, "about Adelaide. I've known she couldn't possibly be your biological child. I've known for years." The world stopped spinning. "What?" "I'm not stupid. I saw how she looked nothing like either of us. I pieced together the timeline, the way your sister disappeared at just the right moment. I understood what you'd done." "Then why?" "Because I loved you," he said, his voice breaking. "Because I understood you were trying to save someone. Because Adelaide was ours in every way that mattered. Because I chose to honor my commitment to you despite the lie." "I'm so sorry," I whispered. "I know," he said. "But the lie became a wall between us, didn't it? We could never quite get back to what we had." "Can we try?" I asked. "Now that it's out in the open, can we try?" He smiled sadly. "I'm 64 years old, Cordelia. We've spent 26 years living parallel lives in the same house. I don't know if I have the energy to tear down all those walls now." 3 weeks later, Thaddeus had a massive stroke. It happened on a Friday morning. He'd been in the garden, tending to the roses he loved. I found him collapsed between the rose bushes, his pruning shears still in his hand. He lived for 6 more days in the hospital, but he never regained consciousness. Adelaide and I sat by his bedside, holding his hands, talking to him, even though we didn't know if he could hear. On the 6th day, surrounded by machines that beeped and hummed, he simply stopped breathing. At his funeral, hundreds of people came to pay their respects. He'd touched so many lives with his work, his kindness, his quiet dignity. Person after person told me how lucky I'd been to have him, what a wonderful marriage we must have had. I smiled and thanked them and felt like a fraud. After Thaddeus died, I sold the house. I couldn't bear to live there anymore. Surrounded by rooms full of memories and regrets, I moved into a smaller place, a condominium downtown, and tried to figure out who I was outside of being Thaddeus's wife or Adelaide's mother. Adelaide had moved to Atlanta with Robert. They had 2 children, my grandchildren, whom I adored. They visited regularly, called every week, invited me to holidays. But I could see Adelaide struggling with her own questions, particularly as she got older and started thinking about family history, genetic inheritance, medical backgrounds. "Mom," she said during one visit when she was 35, "I've been thinking about doing one of those DNA tests, the ancestry ones. Would you be okay with that?" My blood ran cold. Why would you want to do that? Just curiosity. And for the kids, medical history. Robert did one and found some cousins he didn't know about. It was really interesting. I managed to keep my voice steady. "I'd rather you didn't." "Why not?" "Privacy concerns. Those companies sell your data." She looked at me skeptically but dropped it. But I knew it was only a matter of time before the truth would come out. The technology was getting better, more accessible. The secrets we thought we could keep forever were becoming impossible to hide. I thought about telling her then, explaining everything. But how do you tell your 40-something daughter that her entire life is built on a lie? That her mother isn't her mother? That her grandmother is her biological mother? That her grandfather was a monster who wanted her dead before she was even born? I told myself I was protecting her, but really I was protecting myself from having to face what I'd done. The years passed. I grew older, retired from the part-time work I'd been doing at a bookshop. I spent my days reading, writing, taking long walks. I volunteered at a literacy program. I joined a book club. I lived a quiet life, a half-life really, going through motions without truly feeling anything. Lenora died in 2019, at 87. She'd lived alone for 20 years after Gerald's death, never remarrying, never finding whatever happiness might have been possible for her. At her funeral, there were only a handful of people. Adelaide and her family, a few neighbors, me. Looking at my sister and her casket, I felt a complicated grief. She'd given me her daughter, and then disappeared from both our lives. What kind of pain must she have carried all those years? Adelaide stood beside me at the graveside. "I wish I'd known her better," she said. "She always seemed so distant." "She had a hard life," I said, which was true, but incomplete. "Did she ever talk to you about it? About my grandfather?" Dad never wanted to discuss that side of the family. "No," I lied. "She kept things private." After Lenora's funeral, I thought the secrets were buried with her. I thought I could live out my remaining years in my comfortable condo, with my books and my grandchildren and my quiet routine. I thought the past was finally past. Then yesterday, the letter arrived. I've read it 20 times now, this letter from the law firm in Charleston. Each time, my hands shake a little more. "Dear Mrs. Merriweather, we are writing to inform you that materials from our late client Thaddeus Merriweather's personal effects have recently been discovered during the settlement of his professional estate. Among these materials was a sealed letter addressed to you, with instructions that it be delivered 25 years after his death. 25 years? That would have been 2026. But apparently there was some delay in discovering the letter, so it's arrived early, here in 2024. We have enclosed this letter as per Mr. Merriweather's wishes. We also must inform you that there are certain legal documents enclosed that require your attention. The letter from Thaddeus was in a sealed envelope, his handwriting on the front. For Cordelia, to be read when I'm long gone. My hands trembled as I opened it. His handwriting, which I hadn't seen in 25 years, brought tears to my eyes. My dearest Cordelia, if you're reading this, I've been gone for a quarter century. Strange to think of you being 98 years old, if my math is right and you're still with us. I picture you with white hair, still beautiful, still carrying that quiet sadness in your eyes that I could never quite ease. I'm writing this in 1998, a year before I die. Yes, I know when I'm going to die. The doctors have given me a year, maybe less. The cancer is aggressive, and I've decided not to fight it. Adelaide doesn't know yet. You don't know yet. I'll tell you both when the time is right. I stopped reading, tears streaming down my face. Cancer? He'd known he was dying? I could have told you when I found out about the illness, but I chose not to. I wanted our last year to be peaceful, not consumed with treatments and hospitals. Call it control, call it cowardice, but I made my choice. But that's not why I'm writing this letter. I'm writing because there are things I need you to know, things I couldn't say when I was alive. First, I forgive you. I forgave you years ago for the lie about Adelaide. I understood why you did it. You were trying to save your sister and an innocent child. You chose compassion over honesty, and while it cost us something precious, it also gave us Adelaide, and she was worth everything. Second, I never stopped loving you. Even when the distance between us felt insurmountable, even when we were like strangers in the same house, my love for you never wavered. It just got buried under years of unspoken words and careful silence. Third, I have my own confession to make. My heart stopped. In 1985, when Adelaide was 8, I hired a private investigator to find out the truth about her biological parents. I know this was a betrayal of your trust, but I needed to know. I found out about Gerald, about what kind of man he was. I found out how your sister suffered, and I understood, truly understood, why you made the choice you made. But here's what you don't know. I confronted Gerald. I couldn't breathe. I went to Richmond. I found him at his bank. I told him I knew what he'd done, how he traded Lenora, how he tried to force her to end her pregnancy. I told him that Adelaide was protected, that she was loved, and that if he ever tried to find her or interfere in her life, I would destroy him. I had evidence, Cordelia, evidence of his affairs, his financial improprieties, things that would have ruined him. He was furious, of course, threatened me, but I made it clear that I was serious. And I kept tabs on him for years afterward, made sure he never came near Adelaide. I'm telling you this because I want you to know. I was never a passive victim of your lie. I was an active participant in protecting our daughter. Our daughter, Cordelia, because that's what she was, regardless of biology. Now, here's the hard part. I've left Adelaide a letter too. It's enclosed with yours. In it, I've told her the truth, everything, about Lenora, about Gerald, about why you made the choice you made. I've explained it all from my perspective, with all the love and understanding I have. You're probably angry with me right now. You're probably thinking I had no right to reveal your secret after all these years. But, Cordelia, the truth was gonna come out eventually. DNA tests, family resemblances, deathbed confessions, secrets like this can't stay buried forever. And Adelaide deserves to know where she comes from. She deserves to understand her full story. I'm giving you a choice, though. This letter wasn't supposed to reach you until 2026, 25 years after my death, when Adelaide would be nearly 50 years old. But life is unpredictable. If you're reading this earlier, you can decide when to give her my letter. You can prepare her. You can tell her yourself first if you want. The enclosed legal documents give you power of attorney over this decision. Or you can give her the letter now and let me do the explaining from beyond the grave. Either way, the truth needs to come out. Adelaide is strong enough to handle it. She has Robert, she has her children, she has a full life. This won't destroy her. It might hurt her initially, but ultimately, I believe knowing the truth will free her from the vague sense that something in her family history doesn't quite add up. I love you, Cordelia. I loved you from the moment you reached for that Emily Dickinson book in the library. I loved you through all our years together, the good and the difficult. I loved you in those last moments before the stroke, when I was in the garden thinking about how we might have done things differently. Don't spend your remaining years drowning in regret. Tell Adelaide the truth. Free yourself from this burden. And then, if you can, forgive yourself. Forgive yourself for being human, for making an impossible choice in an impossible situation, for doing what you thought was right even when it cost you so much. You deserved better than the life we had. You deserved the love we could have had if not for the walls we built. But you also deserve peace now. Find it, my darling. Find it before it's too late. Forever yours, Thaddeus. P.S. There's one more thing in this package. It's a deed to a house in Asheville, near where we first met. I bought it years ago, thinking maybe someday we'd retire there, go back to where we began. I never told you about it, but it's yours now. Maybe you and Adelaide can go there together after you've talked. Maybe you can rebuild what should have been there all along. I'm still sitting at my kitchen table. The letter is in front of me. Beside it is another sealed envelope, addressed to Adelaide in Thaddeus's handwriting. And beneath that is a deed to a house in Asheville, North Carolina. Adelaide is coming to visit tomorrow. She called last week, said she needed to talk to me about something important. I wonder if somehow, impossibly, she already knows. If some instinct, some genetic memory has finally clicked into place. I'm 73 years old. I've lived with this secret for 47 years. It's defined my life, shaped every relationship, colored every moment. And now I have to decide. Do I tell Adelaide myself, or do I give her father's letter and let him tell her from beyond the grave? I think about the girl I was at 23, reaching for a book of poetry in a library, meeting a man who had changed my life. I think about the choices I made out of love and fear. I think about my sister, who carried her own pain in silence for so long. I think about Thaddeus, who knew the truth and loved us anyway, who protected us even when we didn't know we needed protecting. And I think about Adelaide, my daughter, who isn't my daughter, but is my daughter in every way that matters. She deserves the truth. She deserves to know where she comes from, to understand the complicated love that brought her into being, and the sacrifices made to keep her safe. There's a phrase Thaddeus used in his letter, free yourself from this burden. Can the truth do that? Can it actually set you free? Or does it just create new complications, new hurts? I don't know. But I do know this. I'm tired. Tired of the lies, tired of the distance, tired of carrying this weight alone. And maybe, just maybe, if I tell Adelaide everything, if I ask for her forgiveness, I can spend whatever years I have left actually living instead of just surviving. Tomorrow, when she arrives, I'll make tea the way she likes it, with honey and lemon. I'll sit her down in the living room with the good light, and I'll tell her everything, start to finish, the whole truth. And then I'll give her father's letter, and we'll read it together. And maybe, after 47 years of secrets, we'll finally become the mother and daughter we were always meant to be. Or maybe she'll hate me for the deception, for stealing her biological mother from her, for building her entire life on a foundation of lies. I don't know what will happen, but I know I can't carry this secret anymore. Whatever comes next, whatever the cost, the truth has to come out. Because Thaddeus was right. Secrets like this can't stay buried forever. And I'd rather Adelaide hear it from me, with love and remorse and the full context of impossible choices, than have it come out some other way, cold and shocking and without explanation. Tomorrow, everything changes. Tonight, I'm going to read through the poems I wrote all those years ago, when I was young and in love, and the future seemed full of possibility. And I'm going to write one more, one last poem, about truth and love and the courage it takes to face what we've been running from. Adelaide arrived at 11 o'clock, exactly when she said she would. She's always been punctual, organized, the kind of person who plans everything down to the minute. She got that from Thaddeus, that careful precision. I watched her park her car from my window, and my heart clenched. She's 52 years old now, but as she walked up the path to my building, I could still see the little girl she'd been, the teenager, the bride. All those versions of her existed simultaneously in my mind, layered like transparencies, each one precious and irreplaceable. She was carrying a folder when she came in, and there was something tentative in her expression that I couldn't quite read. "Mom," she said, kissing my cheek, "you look tired. Are you feeling okay?" "I'm fine," I said, which was a lie, but habits are hard to break. "Come in, I made tea." We sat in the living room, and I poured tea into the good china cups, the ones that had been Thaddeus's mother's. My hands were shaking slightly, and I saw Adelaide notice. "Mom, there's something I need to talk to you about," she said, and my stomach dropped. "There's something I need to talk to you, too," I said quickly, "but you go first." She opened her folder and pulled out several pieces of paper. "Last month, Melissa, that's her daughter, my granddaughter, she did one of those DNA tests for a school project, the ancestry ones. She was so excited about it that Robert and I decided to do them too, make it a family thing." The teacup rattled in my saucer as I set it down. "The results came back 2 weeks ago," Adelaide continued, her voice very careful. "And there were some anomalies, unexpected things, relatives showing up who shouldn't be there, genetic markers that don't make sense given what I thought I knew about my family history." I couldn't breathe. "I spent the last 2 weeks investigating," she said, "making phone calls, looking through old records, tracking down leads. And I found out something that I think you need to explain to me." She pulled out a photograph and placed it on the coffee table between us. It was old, faded, from the late 1940s. It showed 2 little girls in matching dresses, Lenora and me, probably around ages 10 and 2. "This is you and Aunt Lenora," Adelaide said. "I found it in her things after she died, but I never really looked at it until now, until I was looking for it." "Adelaide," I began. "The DNA test matched me with several of Aunt Lenora's relatives on her husband Gerald's side, second cousins, third cousins. It matched me with people who should have been my cousins once removed, but the genetic relationship shows up as closer than that, much closer." She looked at me directly, her blue eyes, Gerald's eyes, searching my face. "Aunt Lenora was my mother, wasn't she?" The words hung in the air between us. All the carefully constructed lies, 47 years of deception, crumbled in that single moment. "Yes," I whispered. "Yes, she was." Adelaide closed her eyes, and I saw her hands grip the arms of her chair. When she opened her eyes again, there were tears in them, but her voice was steady. "Tell me everything," she said. "From the beginning. I need to know all of it." And so I did. I told her everything. About Lenora's marriage to Gerald, about the abuse and the affairs and the pregnancy he didn't want. I told her about the desperate phone call, about my promise to take her, to raise her as my own. I told her about lying to Thaddeus, about him figuring it out anyway, about the wall that grew between us because of the secret. I told her about Thaddeus's letter, which I retrieved from my bedroom and handed to her with shaking hands. She read it silently, tears streaming down her face, while I sat across from her and waited for judgment. When she finished, she set the letter down carefully and looked at me for a long moment. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" she asked, and there was hurt in her voice, deep hurt, but also something else, confusion, a need to understand. "I was afraid," I said simply. "Afraid you'd hate me. Afraid you'd feel like your whole life was a lie. Afraid you'd want to find Lenora and Gerald, and that would destroy you." So many fears, Adelaide, and the longer I kept the secret, the harder it became to tell the truth. Aunt Lenora, she said slowly, testing the words. My mother. She was at my wedding. She held Melissa when she was a baby. She was in my life, and I never knew. She loved you, I said, in her way. She gave you to me because she wanted you to have a better life than she could provide. That's a kind of love, isn't it? A painful, sacrificial kind of love. And Gerald, Adelaide said, her voice hardening, my biological father. Thaddeus's letter says he was a monster. He was, I said. He abused your mother for years. He didn't want you. He would have forced Lenora to end the pregnancy if she hadn't run away. But Thaddeus, Dad, she stopped, confused about what to call him now. He was my real father, in every way that mattered. Yes, I said firmly. He chose you. He chose us. Even knowing the truth, even carrying the weight of my lie, he chose to be your father. That's not biology, Adelaide. That's pure love. She was quiet for a long time, processing everything. I watched emotions play across her face. Shock, hurt, confusion, anger, grief. Finally, she spoke. I'm angry, she said. I'm angry that you lied to me for my entire life. I'm angry that Aunt Lenora, my mother, was right there, and I never got to know her as my mother. I'm angry that I wasted time with her, that I didn't ask more questions, didn't push harder to understand her sadness. I know, I said. You have every right to be angry. But, she continued, and her voice softened, I'm also trying to understand. You were 24 years old. Your sister was desperate. You made a choice that you thought was right, even though it cost you so much. And you raised me. You loved me. You were my mother in every single way that matters. You'll always be my daughter, I said, my voice breaking. Always. Biology doesn't change that. I know, she said quietly. I know that, Mom, but I need time to process this. I need time to figure out who I am now with this new information. My whole sense of myself, my identity, it's all shifted. I understand, I said. There's something else, Adelaide said, pulling another paper from her folder. The DNA test matched me with someone I didn't expect, a half-sibling, on Gerald's side. My blood ran cold. What? I have a half-brother, she said. His name is Emmett. He's 63 years old, which means he was born in 1962. Gerald must have had another child, probably with one of his mistresses. Emmett was raised by his mother, never knew Gerald. But he did his DNA test looking for family, and I showed up. Have you contacted him? We've been emailing, she said. He seems nice, careful, like me. He's a teacher in Virginia, married, 2 grown kids. He's as surprised by all this as I am. The ripples of our secrets spreading out across generations, touching lives we never expected. And there's more, Adelaide continued. Emmett has been in contact with someone else, someone who also showed up on the DNA test, someone who says he's been looking for you for a very long time. My heart stopped. What do you mean? Adelaide pulled out one more piece of paper. It was a printout of an email. His name is Thaddeus Merriweather, Jr., she said. He says he's your son. The room spun. I gripped the arms of my chair, certain I was going to faint. That's impossible, I whispered. I never had another child. Adelaide, you're my only... Read the email, she said, handing it to me. My hand shook as I read. Dear Adelaide, my name is Thaddeus Merriweather, Jr., though everyone calls me Teddy. I'm 67 years old, and I've been searching for my father's first family for the past 5 years, ever since my mother passed away and told me the truth about my origins. According to my mother, Eleanor Merriweather, she was married to Thaddeus Merriweather from 1970 to 1973, when she was diagnosed with leukemia. What my father didn't know, what no one knew, is that when Eleanor was diagnosed, she was also 3 months pregnant. The doctors told her the pregnancy was dangerous, that carrying a child would complicate her treatment, possibly kill her. They recommended termination. My father, who loved her desperately, agreed. He wanted to save her life, even if it meant losing their child. But my mother couldn't do it. She arranged with her sister, my Aunt Diana, to fake her death. She went into hiding, had me in secret, and left me with Diana to raise while she underwent experimental treatments in Mexico. She thought if she survived, she could tell my father the truth and reclaim me. But the treatments didn't work. She died in 1974, 18 months after her supposed death, in a clinic in Guadalajara. My Aunt Diana raised me, told me my parents had died in an accident. It wasn't until she was dying herself, 5 years ago, that she told me the truth, that my father was still alive, or had been until 1999, that I had half-siblings somewhere, that my entire existence had been a secret kept out of love and desperation. I've been searching for you ever since. I found records of Thaddeus Merriweather in Charleston, found his obituary, found references to his daughter Adelaide, and then DNA testing made it easier. You showed up as my half-sister, which means you're my father's daughter, too. I don't want to disrupt your life. I don't want anything from you. I just want to know about my father, what kind of man he was, if he was happy, if he lived a good life. And I'd like to meet you, if you're willing. I'd like to meet my sister. I understand if this is too much. I understand if you need time. But I've been waiting my whole life to know where I come from, and now that I've found you, I'm hoping you'll give me a chance. Sincerely, Teddy Merriweather. I read it twice, then a third time. Eleanor, Thaddeus' first wife, the woman he'd spoken of with such tenderness. She hadn't died in 1973. She'd faked her death, had a child, given that child away, and then died for real a year later. Did you know about this? Adelaide asked gently. Did Dad ever mention that Eleanor might have been pregnant? No, I said. He told me she died of leukemia. He never mentioned a pregnancy. He never... I stopped, thinking back to those early conversations by the river. He said losing her was the most painful thing he'd ever experienced. He said he'd thrown himself into his work to avoid feeling anything. But he never mentioned a child. He didn't know, Adelaide said. According to Teddy, no one told him. Eleanor made her sister promise to keep the secret. She thought she was protecting him from more pain. Another secret, I said, and I started to laugh, a bitter, exhausted sound. Another family built on secrets and lies and people trying to protect each other from the truth. Mom, Adelaide said, concerned, are you okay? No, I said honestly. No, I'm not okay. I just found out that Thaddeus had another child, a son, who's been alive all this time, a son he never knew about. And I'm realizing that maybe Thaddeus and I deserved each other after all. Both of us keeping secrets, both of us carrying the weight of choices we couldn't undo. Adelaide moved to sit beside me on the couch, taking my hand. Do you want to meet him, Teddy? I don't know, I said. Part of me wants to, because he's Thaddeus' son, and maybe he can tell me things about Eleanor I never knew. Maybe meeting him will help me understand Thaddeus better. But part of me is terrified. What if he hates me for taking his father's last years? What if he thinks I'm an interloper in his family? Or, Adelaide said softly, what if he's just a lonely man who wants to know where he comes from, like I do now, like we all do? I looked at my daughter, because she was my daughter, regardless of biology, and saw the strength in her face. She'd just learned her entire origin story was a lie, and here she was, comforting me, helping me navigate yet another revelation. When did you become so wise? I asked. I learned from my mother, she said, squeezing my hand. Both of them, apparently. Aunt Lenora gave me life, and you taught me how to live it. That's worth something, isn't it? It's worth everything, I said. We sat there for a while in silence, holding hands, processing the magnitude of what we'd learned. Finally, Adelaide spoke again. Teddy lives in Washington State, but he's willing to travel. He said in his email that there's something he wants to give you, something his mother left for his father, but he never got to deliver. What is it? He wouldn't say, just that it's something his mother wanted Thaddeus to have, and since Thaddeus is gone, it should go to you. I thought about it for a moment, then, tell him to come. Tell him I'd like to meet my husband's son. Tell him I'd like to know about Eleanor, to understand that part of Thaddeus's life that I never really knew, and tell him to bring whatever his mother left. Adelaide nodded. I'll email him tonight. And, Mom, there's one more thing. The house in Asheville that Dad left you, I looked it up. It's beautiful. I was thinking, maybe when Teddy comes, the three of us could go there together. We could spend a few days, talk, share stories about Dad. Maybe start building a new kind of family, one based on truth instead of secrets. A new kind of family, I repeated. After all these years of lies, can we really do that? We can try, Adelaide said. Isn't that what Dad said in his letter? That you deserve to find peace? Maybe we all do. Maybe that's what this is, a chance to stop running from the past and finally face it together. When did my little girl become so brave? I asked. I had a good example, she said, and kissed my cheek. 3 weeks later, the three of us stood on the porch of a Victorian house in Asheville, North Carolina, just a few miles from where the old library used to be, where Thaddeus and I had first met 51 years ago. Teddy Merriweather turned out to be a quiet, thoughtful man with his father's kind eyes and his mother Eleanor's gentle smile. He was tall, silver-haired, with the dignified bearing of someone who'd spent a lifetime being careful, contained, protecting himself from disappointment. When we'd met at the airport, there had been an awkward moment where none of us knew quite what to do. Then Teddy had extended his hand to me and said, "Mrs. Merriweather, thank you for agreeing to see me. I know this must be strange." "Call me Cordelia," I'd said, and yes, it's strange, but then my whole life has been strange lately. Come, let's go meet your sister properly. Adelaide and Teddy had embraced carefully, and I'd seen tears in both their eyes. Siblings who'd never known each other existed, brought together by DNA and secrets and the complicated legacy of a man they'd both lost. Now, standing on this porch, looking at the house Thaddeus had bought in secret, I felt something shift inside my chest. The house was beautiful, pale yellow with white trim, a wraparound porch, a garden that had been maintained by a property management company for years. Through the windows, I could see hardwood floors, built-in bookshelves, crown molding. "He bought this?" Adelaide asked, wonder in her voice, "and never told you?" "He was full of secrets, too," I said. "Apparently, keeping 'em ran in the family." Teddy had been quiet since we'd arrived, but now he spoke. "My Aunt Diana told me that my mother, Eleanor, used to talk about Asheville. She and my father came here on their honeymoon. She said it was the happiest week of her life. Maybe that's why he bought this house. Maybe he was trying to recapture that happiness." We went inside, and it was like stepping into a dream. The house was furnished, lived in, but immaculate. There were books on the shelves, art on the walls, fresh flowers in vases that the property company must have placed recently. "He set this up as if someone lived here," Adelaide said, running her hand along a mahogany table in the dining room. "Look, there are photos." And there were. Photos of Adelaide at various ages, school pictures, graduation photos, her wedding. Photos of Thaddeus with his buildings, accepting awards, giving speeches. And in one corner, hidden slightly behind the others, a photo I'd never seen before. A young Eleanor Merriweather, beautiful and glowing, standing next to a beaming Thaddeus on what must have been their wedding day. Teddy picked up the photo carefully. "I have this same picture," he said. "My aunt gave it to me. This was 1970, 6 months before I was conceived." "She was beautiful," I said, and I meant it. Looking at Eleanor's face, I felt no jealousy, only sadness for a life cut short, for love lost too soon. "She was," Teddy agreed. And from everything my aunt told me, she was kind, compassionate. She would have loved my father's choice to raise Adelaide, to take in a child who needed a home. She would have understood completely. We explored the house together, the three of us, discovering room after room filled with echoes of Thaddeus's life. Upstairs there were 3 bedrooms, each decorated differently. One was clearly meant to be an office, with a drafting table and architectural drawings on the walls. One was decorated in soft blues and yellows, feminine and peaceful. And one was set up as a guest room, simple and welcoming. "He was creating alternate versions of our lives," Adelaide said softly, "imagining what might have been, what could have been if Mom had told the truth earlier, if they'd reconciled, if they'd come here together." In the office, I found something that made me gasp, a filing cabinet filled with poems. My poems, ones I'd written and thrown away, ones I'd shown him in our early days together, ones I'd published in small literary magazines over the years. He'd kept them all, organized by date, carefully preserved. "He kept your poems," Adelaide said, looking over my shoulder. "All these years, he kept them." "He was my biggest fan," I said, tears streaming down my face. "Even when we'd built all those walls between us, even when we barely spoke some days, he was collecting my words, saving them like they mattered." "They did matter," Teddy said. "You mattered to him. My aunt told me that after my mother died, really died. My father went into a deep depression. He didn't speak about her, didn't grieve openly, just closed himself off from the world. Until you met you. She said you brought him back to life, made him believe in love again. That's not nothing, Cordelia. That's everything." We spent the afternoon in that house, sharing stories about Thaddeus. Teddy told us about finding his father's letters to Eleanor, letters written in the months before her diagnosis, full of dreams for their future, plans for children they'd raise, buildings they'd design together. Adelaide shared memories of her childhood, of Thaddeus teaching her to draw, reading her stories, taking her to construction sites to show her how buildings grew from blueprints to reality. And I talked about our beginning, about the library and the Emily Dickinson book, about walking by the French Broad River and discovering what it meant to be truly seen by another person. As the sun began to set, Teddy reached into his bag and pulled out a small wooden box. "This is what my mother left for my father," he said. "My Aunt Diana gave it to me before she died. She said Eleanor made her promise to keep it until I was old enough to understand, and then to find my father and give it to him. But by the time I was old enough, he was already gone, so I'm giving it to you instead." He handed me the box, and I opened it with trembling fingers. Inside was a letter, yellowed with age, in handwriting I didn't recognize. And beneath the letter was a small silver locket on a delicate chain. I opened the letter carefully. "My dearest Thaddeus, if you're reading this, then I'm gone, and Diana has finally told you the truth about our son. I'm so sorry, my love. I'm sorry for the deception, for the pain my choices must have caused you. I'm sorry you didn't get to know Teddy, to watch him grow, to be his father. But I want you to know that I made my choice out of love. I couldn't let you sacrifice our child to save me. I couldn't let you live with that guilt if my treatments didn't work. So I took the choice away from you. I went into hiding, had our baby, gave him to Diana to raise in safety and love. And then I went to Mexico to try every experimental treatment available, to fight with everything I had to survive. It wasn't enough. The cancer won. But I got to hold our son before I left. I got to look into his eyes and see you there. I got to know that something of our love would continue, even after I was gone. I asked Diana to wait to tell you, to wait until Teddy was grown, until he could understand the complexity of what happened. I know this is asking a lot of you, to forgive this deception, to understand why I made the choices I made, but I hope you can. The locket contains a photo of Teddy as a baby and a lock of his hair. It's not much, but it's what I could give you, a piece of the son you never knew you had. I love you, Thaddeus. I loved you from the moment we met until my last breath. And if there's any justice in the universe, I'll love you beyond that, into whatever comes next. If you found love again, if you've built a new life, please don't let this destroy it. Embrace it instead. Love Teddy if you can. Love whoever has helped you heal. Love as fiercely and bravely as you can, because that's what makes life worth living. Forever yours, Eleanor. I opened the locket. Inside was a tiny photo of a newborn baby and a curl of dark hair, carefully preserved. She loved him so much, I whispered. She gave up everything to protect him. She did, Teddy said. And in a way, that's what you did for Adelaide. You gave up your truth, your authentic relationship with Thaddeus, to protect her and your sister. Different circumstances, but the same kind of sacrifice. We're all connected by secrets and sacrifices, Adelaide said. 3 generations of people trying to protect each other, hurting each other in the process, loving each other despite the pain. So what do we do now? I asked. How do we move forward from here? Adelaide looked around the house, at the life Thaddeus had imagined but never lived. We stop keeping secrets, she said. We tell the truth, even when it's hard. We build something real here, in this house, something based on who we actually are instead of who we pretended to be. A family, Teddy said, a real one, built on truth. Is that possible? I asked. Can we really do that after everything? Yes, Adelaide said firmly, because that's what Dad wanted. That's what he was trying to give you with this house, with his letter, with all of it. He was giving you permission to stop running, to stop hiding, to finally be free. I looked at these 2 people, Thaddeus's children, both of them shaped by secrets and sacrifices, both of them choosing to reach for truth and connection despite the pain. And I realized that maybe, just maybe, it wasn't too late for any of us. Then let's do it, I said. Let's make this house what it was always meant to be, a place where the truth lives, where we can come together and build something real. A place where love gets a second chance, Adelaide added. Or a first chance, Teddy said, since we're meeting for the first time. And sitting there in that house in Asheville, the 3 of us, a 73-year-old woman who'd lived with lies for too long, a 52-year-old woman discovering her true origins, and a 67-year-old man finding the family he'd never known he had, we began the hard, beautiful work of truth-telling. It's been 6 months since that day in Asheville, and I'm writing this from the porch of the yellow Victorian house that Thaddeus bought in secret. Adelaide and her family came for Thanksgiving. Teddy drove across the country with his wife Martha, whom I've come to adore. My grandchildren played in the garden while we cooked together, shared stories, laughed until we cried. The truth didn't destroy us. It freed us. Adelaide and I are closer now than we've ever been. She calls me several times a week, not out of obligation, but out of genuine desire to connect. We talk about Lenora sometimes, about the mother she never really knew, and I share what I remember of my sister's gentleness, her secret strengths. Teddy has become the brother Adelaide never had. They email daily, sharing pictures, jokes, mundane details of their lives. He's teaching her about architecture, about their father's professional legacy. She's teaching him about family, about how love doesn't require blood ties. And I've started writing again, really writing, poetry that tells the truth about my life. Some of it is painful to write, confronting the choices I made, the time I wasted, the love I took for granted. But some of it is joyful, celebrating this unexpected late-life renaissance, this discovery that it's never too late to choose authenticity. Last month, a small literary magazine accepted 3 of my poems. When the acceptance letter arrived, I wept. Not because of the validation, though that was nice, but because Thaddeus would have been so proud. He always believed in my words, even when I didn't believe in them myself. I'm 73 years old, and I'm finally living the life I was meant to live. I'm telling my truth. I'm loving openly. I'm building relationships based on authenticity instead of fear. Is it too late? No, it's exactly the right time. Because here's what I've learned. Love after 60 isn't about grand passions or fairy tale endings. It's about the courage to face your past, to acknowledge your mistakes, to ask for forgiveness and grant it generously. It's about discovering that family isn't just who raised you or who shares your blood, but who chooses to show up, to see you clearly, to love you anyway. Thaddeus and I lost so many years to secrets and silence, but his final gift to me, the house, the letters, the truth he made space for, has given me something precious, a second act, a chance to love and be loved in ways I never allowed myself before. So if you're reading this and thinking it's too late for you, that you've made too many mistakes, carried secrets too long, burned too many bridges, I'm here to tell you that you're wrong. It's never too late for truth. It's never too late for love. It's never too late to come home to yourself. I'm sitting on this porch in Asheville, in the town where I first fell in love 51 years ago, and I'm surrounded by family. Not the family I imagined, but the one that chose itself, the one that fought through lies and pain to find something real. And I'm finally, truly, completely free. That's my story. That's my truth. That's what love after 60 looks like for me. What will it look like for you? Cordelia Merriweather, Asheville, North Carolina, Spring 2025.